Hello everybody, welcome to Alan History Nerd. This video is US politics, informal sources of presidential power and their use. This is part 2 of a two-part bit on this particular part of the spec. The other video I will give you links to, and I will show how I look at different elements in the two videos. Now this is all part of my playlist, my series looking at A-level politics, where I'm going through the entire specification. So if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications as I go through and add more stuff. So as I've already mentioned, I'm looking at this particular part of the specification, 3.2, informal sources of presidential power and their use. So this is all part of component 3, the USA section. So I've looked at in part 1 the electoral mandate, executive orders, national events and the cabinet, as well as the powers of persuasion, including the nature characteristics of each president. And so part 1, there should be a link appearing at the top of the screen if you want to have a look at that one, if you haven't looked at that already. This part I'm going to look at essentially I'm going to look at EXOP, the executive office of the president, including various parts of it, such as the National Security Council, the Office of Management and Budget, the White House office. Now, and I'm going to go through, I'm going to try and look at the significance of these powers with references to presidents since '92, and in particular, again, as normal, I'm going to try and concentrate on Obama and Trump. Though obviously as part of your studies, it's well worth you going away and doing some further research and building up some further examples. So EXOP is the Executive Office of the President. It was created in 1939, and the reason it was created was to stop the President being overwhelmed, as federal government had grown to such an extent that it was becoming unmanageable, and whilst the departments had large kind of bureaucracies behind them, the President themselves didn't. And EXOP has grown as federal government has grown, giving the president an impressive kind of 2,000 members of staff. And this includes a lot of their closest advisors, and ensures that the government is going to move in the direction that they want it to, because they are kind of physically distant from the actual federal departments, and it's very difficult for them to have kind of complete oversight of what's going on there. And as we've seen with the other one, they don't tend to use the cabinet a huge amount, and so what EXOP does is it gives them that kind of oversight and those people who are close to them. Now, EXOP is often referred to as the West Wing, after the West Wing of the White House. Now, it isn't solely based there anymore, and this has given rise to TV shows such as The West Wing, which has been a huge hit. And obviously, there's lots of controversy and lots of interest in exactly what goes on in these corridors of power in the West Wing of the White House, and the personalities involved. And there's lots of really powerful people, and how much power the president has and how he interacts with the other people is one of the bits that makes all this really, really interesting. So, well, what does it do? It does a whole range of different things. It offers policy advice to the president. So, for example, the OMB will give the president advice on financial matters. The NSC will give him advice on security matters. The White House office, a key part of EXOP, manages the president's diaries, headed by the chief of staff, who manages what the president does each day, and is a gatekeeper to make sure only the right people get to talk to the president. And often they can be seen as kind of fairly controlling and overbearing, and that they have almost seemingly as much power as the president themselves. It gives the president oversight of departments, I've already mentioned. So they will have members of EXOP whose job it is to check up on, or teams of people whose job it is to check up on departments, make sure they are doing things as the president wants them to be done. And the OMB will go around at all the departments and check on their spending. There's the Director of National Intelligence, who oversees the CIA and FBI. So within the West Wing, within EXOP, the president has got these people working closely with them, who can say, right, this is what's happening there, this is what's happening there. The cabinet member will come and tell you this, but actually this is what's going on. And this can lead to some tensions and some problems, but it gives the president that kind of oversight of what is happening. Another part of EXOP's key job is to work with Congress to actually pass legislation. Again, in the increasingly partisan era of American politics that we're in, then this has become a more and more difficult task. You might, if you've watched things like The West Wing or House of Cards, and you might see kind of dramatic versions of this kind of happening, where the president and his team are working with various members of Congress to see if they can get a bill passed. A lot of this work is formally done through the Office of Legislative Affairs. Now, you also get bits of EXOP, which are kind of expanded bits, which have very specific jobs to work on some of the president's priorities, and they might then work with voluntary sections or other parts of other parts of business and different parts of society to get things done. So you kind of extra bits kind of bolted on. So it's not kind of a one size fits all for every single president and for every single term. There might be something that doesn't fit under the traditional offices that the president wants doing, and so they will just create another one, and there's kind of precedent for that happening. Now, one of the big arguments about EXOP is whether it has too much power, in particular thing I've alluded to already, which is the clashes with the federal departments. And its growth has definitely posed a threat to the traditional power of cabinet and to the traditional departments. At worst, you can get a situation where they clash with each other, and this leads to a large degree of tension. EXOP is obviously closer to the president than the cabinet, both physically and in terms of working relationships. So whilst a cabinet might not meet, one might only be meeting, as Bush often talked about, the idea of about 6 times a year. The people in EXOP, particularly in the White House office, are going to be seeing the president every day. The NSC is going to see the president every day, and they are located in the White House, whilst the departments are kind of scattered across Washington in the various buildings. And that means that certain key policy areas can be almost completely taken over by EXOP. And this was very much the case with foreign policy under George W. Bush, and particularly in his first term, where it was directed notably by a combination of Bush himself, Condoleezza Rice, the National Security Advisor, and Dick Cheney, the VP. Rather than by the State Department, which is headed by Colin Powell. And there are incidences where essentially foreign leaders, notably in Moscow, were told, like, you need any direct dealings to get hold of the president and get hold of Condoleezza Rice, or get hold of Dick Cheney, rather than get hold of Colin Powell and the State Department. And one of the tensions in all of this is obviously all these people that in EXOP are kind of presidential appointees, and you've got, that's the case at the very top of the different state departments, these different federal departments. But one of the worries of a lot of presidents is they talk about cabinet members going native. So they'll start off in the president, and then we'll see eye to eye on the issues and what he's doing, and then they'll go into their department and they'll start talking to the permanent staff in there, who are the experts who have done all the research and know exactly what's going on. And they'll say, the president and I think we should do this, and then I go, no, that just won't work because of this, and they explain why it won't work. And then often, well, President will find members of his cabinet are coming back to him and go, no, those stuff we said should happen, shouldn't happen actually, or we can't happen. And that can cause a huge amount of frustration, and that's when the president tends to start relying more on EXOP instead. Now, another form of tension was created under Obama. He created these idea of policy czars, including Carol Browner on climate, and Nancy Ann DePerle, who was in charge of health, and she was a really, really key figure in pushing through Obamacare. And again, this showed that decision-making was being directed from the West Wing, not from the departments, and these czars would often clash with the heads of those departments and key figures in those departments. And when they did, they often then suddenly found out, because of the way that it's been created, they don't actually really have any constitutional power behind them themselves. They might be told that this is the will of the president, but the department has the money and the administrators and all the stuff behind it to make things actually work. And so these policy czars that Obama created often complained it was very difficult for them to actually get the departments to do what they wanted them to do, because they were an attachment to a chain of power, an addition to a chain of power that already existed, and essentially the departments took direction from their most senior member, their member of cabinet, and not necessarily from someone from EXOP. The Chief of Staff is arguably the most important member of EXOP, and they're in the White House office. Now, we'll look at them in a bit more detail a bit later on. We'll look at who, but they are the gatekeeper. They are the person who holds a lot of the strings of power. I mean, Trump, rather amazingly, has gone through 4 in 4 years. So Priebus, who essentially went very quickly following all the stuff to do with Russian interference. There was Kelly, who fell out with Trump and described the working conditions in the White House as being toxic, and has actually blamed Trump for that, and said that this isn't an environment anybody can work and thrive in for any length of time, and that there was lots of good people trying to do good things, but the bad conditions, the bad atmosphere, it all came from the top. It all came from Trump. Then you had Mulvaney, who had held other jobs in EXOP and then became Chief of Staff, and he went following the Ukraine scandal. And then at the moment, we've got Meadows. Well, I say at the moment, assuming that he's surviving these last few days of Trump's time in office, and he's been a key figure in working with Trump, enabling Trump, and pushing Trump in his kind of failed attempts to overturn the election. So, including, for example, infamous phone calls to Georgia. A key part of EXOP is the National Security Council, the NSC. It was created in 1947, and it played a really key role in that point, and has ever since. I mean, we're talking about it being created in the era of the Cold War, and security concerns, obviously a major part of any president's term in office, and foreign policy is something the president has kind of unrivaled powers in. The office of the NSC is very close to the Oval Office. They provide daily briefings to the president, and this is one of the key parts on any president's day. There's been controversy over them during the Trump-Biden transition, with Biden initially not getting the briefings because Trump hadn't conceded. I mean, there has been stuff during Trump's tenure in office where it's been suggested he doesn't take these particularly seriously, he doesn't always listen to them. Or understand them, even if he is listening. It's headed by the National Security Advisor, who is a very key figure in any administration, and the NSC is vital in improving guidance to presidents over the most crucial and sensitive issues of national security. Trump, early in his term, was highly criticised for trying to politicise the council with the appointment of Steve Bannon, who had some crazy ideas as a senior counsel to the NSC. Susan Rice, who was the NSA under Obama, publicly criticised this, tweeted about it, so worried that Bannon would twist intelligence to his own political ends and take away that kind of impartiality that's supposed to be in there. The arrangement actually only lasted for 3 months. In Trump's term, we also see that a whole variety of a mess actually with all of this. Michael Flynn was NSA for a grand total of, I've seen various points in this, books I've used have said 24 days, a lot of stuff online says 22 days, but whichever of those it is the shortest term in history. It is very, very short, and we've seen Flynn he's been pardoned by Trump. He is pushing a whole range of conspiracy theories and kind of outrageous policies that Trump should follow. There's been a whole range of resignations from the NSC following the attack on the Capitol on the 6th of January 2021, including the Deputy NSA, Matt Pottinger. Now, the current NSA, Robert O'Brien, again, he is the 4th person to hold this office under Trump, openly praised Pence's refusal to follow Trump's instructions about altering the counting of the Electoral College votes on January the 6th. And so we're seeing a lot of tension. It's something that should be relatively uncontroversial because it's providing such an important service to the president. We've seen a politicization of it. We've seen a variety of people involved in it who probably shouldn't have been during the Trump administration. I mean, you can go further back and look at its importance. If, for example, you go back to the time under Bush with Condoleezza Rice, and that she played an incredibly important role, as I already mentioned, and the whole thing with foreign policy being driven through the NSC rather than through the State Department. The Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, this is the biggest part of EXOP, has about 500 employees, advises the President on their annual budget and then how that budget should be allocated amongst the departments and spending priorities, and oversees the spending then of those federal departments. So these are the money people, these are the people with their eyes on the money, and it's a lot of money to keep your eyes on. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that talks about the fact that the annual budget was about $4 trillion in around 2015, 2017, and it raised to an eye-watering $6.55 trillion in 2020. And there is a gigantic budget deficit, something that the Republicans are very, very strongly opposed to traditionally. And I mean, part of it you could explain is because of what's been going on with COVID. It's slightly inevitable with that at the moment. The OMB often leads on key policy. So Mike Mulvaney, who has had a variety of jobs at one point, was a director of OMB under Trump, and he led the attempts to repeal Obamacare because it decided that a lot of the strings and things that needed cutting and all pulling apart was all linked in with budgets and funding. Obama's term, it had a degree of instability in it. He had 6 directors of the OMB in his terms in office. Again, so instability is not unique to Trump. Both Obama and Trump suffered federal shutdowns over failure to pass their budgets. Trump's was the longest in US history at 35 days. In something really remarkable, in December 2020, Trump actually, according to reports, came very, very close because it had the COVID bill kind of connected to it. Came very close to vetoing his own budget, which really would have been quite remarkable. So again, OMB, loads of advice, loads of oversight of what's going on across the executive departments, and so a really important part of EXOP. Right at the centre of all of this is the White House office, and this involves the closest aides to the president, including their chief of staff. The chief of staff has oversight of the whole of EXOP, as well as controlling access to the president. As a gatekeeper, the idea is they should be the honest broker, making sure that the president gets access to different perspectives and advice before making decisions. And so the idea is that they should be fairly politically neutral. And essentially their job is to administer and to make things run smoothly. This, however, is not always the case. Bill Daley, who served under Obama as chief of staff, was largely judged to have been unsuccessful, notably by the more radical part of the Democrat Party, who felt that he gave too much ground to the Republicans. And there's also lots of stuff that came out that suggests he didn't have control of the West Wing particularly effectively. As mentioned earlier, I mean, Trump's had 4 different chiefs of staff, and there really is a lot of concern, or has been a lot of concern through his entire term in office, about the White House office being full of people who go along with his worst impulses, who won't contradict him. So he isn't getting good, solid advice. And when he goes on his wild conspiracy theories, that he hasn't got people pulling him in and going, no, actually, Donald, that's not true. He has also been very notable for making kind of giving special advisory positions to members of his own family, but also to a whole range of kind of discredited conspiracy theorists, and making them some of his key advisors. And we get lots of rumor, and we get lots of leaks coming out of the White House office under Trump, suggesting again, as we've seen with the multiple former members of staff that he has, people coming out and saying things just aren't right. This is dysfunctional. The atmosphere now is horrendous, and that will be particularly the case at the moment, where everybody's kind of hunkered down as everything's unravelled, particularly on and after the 6th of January. So I hope that's been helpful for you and given you a bit of an insight into EXOP, what it is and what it does, and a range of some recent examples to kind of highlight some of that, again, highlighting mainly stuff looking at Trump and Obama. As I said earlier, this is part of my series looking at A-level politics, a whole variety of politics playlists on my channel, as well as, again, as the name of the channel suggests, a whole range of history ones as well on British, American, Russian history, and hopefully lots on there that will educate and inform. So if you haven't subscribed already, then please do. If this video has been helpful to you, then please hit like. If you have any questions for me, then please leave them in the comment section below. Thank you very much for watching.